So the Springfield City Council approved a $170+ million budget on Tuesday after a nearly 3-hour meeting where they had to deal with like 23 different amendments that lawmakers brought forward. And to talk about this and how much exactly is being spent and some of the new priorities that are laid out in how the city is expected to spend your tax dollars, we're joined now live in studio, not live in studio, on the phone. I wish he was in studio, but I did. All full disclosure, I texted him at like 4 o'clock this morning and asked if he could join us. So appreciate Springfield Budget Director Bill McCarty joining us by phone on the WMAY morning news feed at 7:43. Good morning, Director. Again, thank you for accepting the invite despite it being extremely early in the morning.
Right. No problem at all. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk, Greg. It's been too long.
It has been. So we'll obviously just jump right into it because there's a lot of things going on with this budget. Give us an overview. How much is it? When does it start? And what are some of the major priorities that are laid out in the budget that are different from last year, for instance?
So the budget itself overall is about $627 million when you include the utility and all that. The $170 million number you were referencing is the general fund or corporate fund budget. It's about $180 million. Now, to put that into context, Greg, typically in a typical year, which this is not, we would have a budget in the corporate fund of around 135 to 140 million. But a confluence of events with economic stimulus, extra unemployment payments, a new online sales tax law, et cetera, came together and put us in a really, really strong financial position this year. We're looking at having a fund balance in the current year we're at ending, which ends Monday, by the way, the 28th. We're looking at having a fund balance around $50 million, which is by far the largest amount we've ever had. Greg, you and I have been talking budget for, 10, 11 years now since I've been there, and numbers never been that big. So as a result of that, we were in a position to do some things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do, like buy 7 more fire trucks on top of the 2 that we have ordered. So when that's done, we will have replaced 60% of our frontline fire apparatus, which is just unprecedented. We're also talking about building up to 3 firehouses around town, relocating some or adding one down in the southwest quadrant in the veteran Spalding Orchard area, so that we've got Piper Glen and Panther Creek and all that much better covered than they have been. We're looking at doing some, one of the amendments that passed from Alderman Redpath was to help stabilize the water fund by forgiving the pilot payment next year, since the corporate fund's in such good shape. And overall, there were about 23 different amendments, and not all of them passed, but certainly a majority of them did. Lots of different things in there.
So, of course, with as you mentioned, it wasn't just the federal COVID relief dollars that the city has, and you're expecting $17 million more. We may touch on that here in a moment. But
Yep.
Also, you touched on the recent, in some people affectionately call it the Amazon tax. How beneficial has that been for online retailers that have items purchased by a consumer online, if they're in Illinois, and that sales tax that years ago people weren't having to pay just because there wasn't the Supreme Court precedent that was set a couple of years ago? How much has that impacted the city budget when it comes to being able to secure some of those sales taxes?
It's actually helped to the tune of several $million in this past year. I took a look at it and realized that, and we knew, Greg, that when that kicked in, that we were finally going to start getting back at least, not all, but at least a good chunk of what we lost. The way the law is structured, we're never going to get back everything that we lost when we had people shopping here in town, because if I buy something and it comes from a warehouse, and we'll just stick with Amazon since you brought it up. If it comes from an Amazon warehouse in Joliet or Edwardsville or somewhere else in Illinois, actually that place gets the tax. So Joliet or Edwardsville would get the tax. But the majority of online sales, they originate from outside our borders. And that is when the local sales tax gets attached. And we get the money, the sales tax that we would have gotten as if they walked into our local store, whether Meijer, Walmart, Kohl's, whatever, what have you. That really has made a tremendous difference. And of the 5 different things that led to that fund balance I talked about earlier, that's the one thing that we expect to continue. The other 4 things we do not expect to continue. But that is the one thing that will continue to help us as we go forward. And as you and I've talked about numerous times, we're going to need every penny we can get as we move closer and closer to 2040 with our pension debt obligations growing each and every year.
So we'll obviously have more conversations about that in the future, but I do want to touch on the federal COVID relief dollars. Now, two
The ARPA
years
dollars.
ago,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
2 years ago when COVID hit and the stay-at-home orders were issued, there was a lot of concern that it was going to be a rough couple of years, if not a rough 10 years. But obviously, with the COVID relief dollars that the federal government passed, the city got $17 million last year. You're expected to get another $17 million this year. What can those dollars be used for, and is that laid out in the budget that passed Tuesday?
So, and don't forget, prior to that, Greg, we got 4.8 million in CARES money, Cures and
That's
CARES
right.
money,
Yep.
which was the first round of federal stimulus for local governments, well, most governments. And then, of course, yeah, as you mentioned, through ARPA, which is the American Recovery something Act.
American Rescue Plan Act.
There you go.
I think that's
Plan,
ARPA.
Rescue Plan Act. There you go, ARPA. Yeah, we just call it ARPA. You know, we use acronyms around the city.
Right.
We're getting 33.8 million. We already got half of that last year. We'll get the other half this year. What can it be used for? Well, it really depends. There's 4 pillars of the different things you can use it for. The one that we're keyed in on mostly is revenue replacement. And the reason for doing that is with revenue replacement dollars, you can use it for virtually anything you want with a few exceptions. You can't use it for debt service. You can't use it for pensions. You can't use it for building up like a rainy day or reserve fund. Those are pretty much the major stipulations for it. Other than that, we're able to use it for just about anything if captured through that revenue replacement pillar. And given the calculation provisions that they provide, we ran the numbers and we think we can capture most of it or all of it through revenue replacement. Therefore, we're using it for a variety of things. There's in next year's budget, I think we've got about 25 million of it budgeted, a couple million of that for fire equipment, 4 million of it for firehouses. We've got $6 million in road modernization projects that Public Works are going to do. We put $3.5 million in for water projects at the utility. So really spread that money around to different areas of need, doing some projects that, like I said, we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. The whole point of that money is to put people to work, to get the economy moving. So they want you to spend it, and we're going to do just that.
Talking with Budget Director Bill McCarty with the city of Springfield. The next city budget starts March 1st. They approved that budget, and it kind of blew me away. I forgot that the corporate fund is separate from CWLP, and CWLP's budget is how much again?
Oh, geez. Well, they've now closed 3 units. So I want to say it's maybe, I don't know, off the top of my head, maybe 300 million, give or take.
Yeah, so that's
I'd have to get you an exact number.
Sure. But overall, it was close to what, like a $600 million budget when including
600. When we introduced it was 626 million, and so with the amendments up and down, it's still probably in that same ballpark, maybe a million or so off. I know with the amendments the other night, we ended up adding a negative net impact on the corporate fund of 1.2 million. In other words, we had $800 and some thousand worth of spending added in amendments on Tuesday night. Then at same time, we also had $415,000 in revenue that was taken away, and that was the pilot I talked about earlier from the water fund.
Great, yeah. Bill McCarty, budget director here for the city of Springfield, talking about that budget that passed. And we'll have to talk more in the future about pensions and how exactly that's going to pan out over the next several years as we get closer to that 2040 ramp. But obviously, the city is putting into pensions. How much was approved to give to the police and fire pension funds?
So our required payment this year was about $28 million, and that is the actuarial required payment. You pay an actuary to tell you what you need to do to be on track to that deadline of 2040. But on top of that, we added an extra $3 million in pension payments. So we're paying $3 million more than we really need to per the actuary. And that's just to try and get ahead of it. We've got a mountain coming. We know it. We've been climbing that mountain. It's getting steeper and steeper. We're just trying to do anything we can to mitigate that and sort of lessen that slope as much as possible. And best thing we can do is try and get money in quicker to do that as we move closer and closer to 2040.
And one thing also, Budget Director Bill McCarty, any tax increases in this budget?
No tax increases, no service cuts. Quite the opposite. There's a lot of a lot of positive things for Springfield citizens in this budget. We'll see a lot of things going on in the next year or so.
Yeah, we'll be watching that, and of course, we hear Budget Director McCarty every Wednesday, practically, with the council roundup after Tuesday's meeting. So greatly appreciate you taking the time, and we'll catch you in studio next time. All right?
There's no problem, Greg. Would love to come back to the studio. It's been too long, and I just certainly hope that now that your listeners have awoke for the day, that we haven't put them right back to sleep by talking a bunch of numbers.
I hope so, too. Waking up every morning here with the WMAY morning news feed. Director, be safe, all right? We'll talk soon.
Take care, buddy.
It is WMAY now, 7:52, and your forecast.